Friends, Shabbat Shalom. Again, I am very grateful for the opportunity to share with you some words of Torah, and I take that responsibility very seriously. One of the major building blocks of our high holiday period, our high holiday liturgy, is the act of confession. There is a specific word for it in Jewish tradition. It is called vidui. And confession is not just thinking to yourself that something is wrong. Confession, according to Jewish tradition, must be outspoken, has to be spoken out loud, or it's not really confession. There is some idea that unless you give reality to it, you put something in words, and words are the greatest reality in Judaism, you really haven't really done anything. Our liturgy contains various forms of confession. And over the years, different rabbis created different confessions, and those traditions became woven together in the high holiday liturgy. The most prominent list of these confessions is what's called the Al-Chet, and anyone who's been to a congregation on Yom Kippur is very familiar with the Al-Chet. It's a series of articulation of certain sins that we have performed individually and collectively. You know, it's Al-Chet shechatanu lefanecha. For the sins, our God, we ask forgiveness. Now, originally, there were only 6 sins that were listed in the tradition. And over the years, different parts of the Jewish community, the Hasidic community, the Sephardic community, the Ashkenazi community, the Yemenite community, all these different communities came up with their own unique lists of what these sins could be and the sins that we need to confess. Here are some of them that are shared by all traditions. The ways that we disrespect parents and teachers, the harm that we cause in your world through inflexibility and stubbornness. Or another one, the way we have wronged you by losing self-control. And then at the very end, there is the punctuation of it, V'al Kulam, which is sung beautifully, when Becky sings it beautifully after each of the sections of the confessions in our liturgy, which means for all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. In the process of doing this, by articulating them out loud, it's supposed to be a healing process for oneself and for the community. The list is long, but each of them is conscience-provoking. And what I do each year is to go through the list, and usually I find one of them that is particularly meaningful to me and relevant in that given year. And as I have been reviewing this list of sins that are part of our liturgy, I have come to one that I cannot skip. I keep focusing in on it. It says, for the sins that we have committed against you by abusing our power. Again, for the sins that we have sinned against you by abusing our power. I'm not speaking about the abuse of power in government. That's an issue that is for another day and another discussion. This year, it is the abuse of human power that threatens our very existence as a people in a world. Let me explain. Human beings have extraordinary gifts. We are truly remarkable beings created by God. The fact that we have been able to evolve into beings capable of thought, of memory, of the capacity to learn, of creativity, being able to take our learning and transform it into a material culture, an artistic world. I don't have to fully describe to you the extraordinary nature of what it means to be a human being. We are ingenious, and what we have accomplished as part of civilization is really indescribable. No other creature on earth can do what we can do. And yet, our extraordinary power threatens us as well. We share this planet with other forms of life. And the question that we face as a human race is, what are we going to do with our power? What are we doing with our power, and what will we do with our power in the future? Do we use the planet only for our own needs as we assert our incredible capacity to alter nature? Or do we realize that we must live in balance with all other life? And we must utilize our power carefully, and if not, we can destroy the world in which we need to survive. The rabbis of our tradition, and the biblical tradition before that, was very sensitive to that issue. This is not some application of an ancient idea, pulling it out of nowhere and artificially applying it to contemporary times. The Bible and the rabbis were incredibly focused in on this abuse of power. For example, we are told cutting down fruit-bearing trees, even in war, was forbidden. Future generations would need them. Any act of waste was seen as a violation of the Torah. In Genesis 2, verse 15, God placed humanity in the Garden of Eden and said to work it and to watch over it. And this is one of the most provocative rabbinic statements, and one that we should be mindful of often. It says, upon creating the first human beings, God guided them around the Garden of Eden, saying, look at my creation. See how beautiful and perfect they are. I created everything for you. Make sure you don't ruin or devastate my world. If you do, there'll be no one after you to fix it. These statements are both theological and practical. It is not our world according to Jewish tradition. We don't own it. It's on loan to us from God. That's a fundamental principle of biblical religion. We are its guardian. And since the Industrial Revolution, we have been acting as if we do own it, and we can do whatever we want with it. Clearly, Judaism has an unambiguous environmental imperative. We do not have the right to do whatever we want with this world. And each of us plays a role in this, personally through our own actions, and advocating in our government policies that support the long-term survival of the human race. What is our legacy to future generations? What kind of world are we leaving to our grandchildren and to future generations beyond them? Have you seen the pictures of the wildfires on the West Coast? I'm sure you have. A record amount of California is burning, spurred by nearly 20 years of mega drought. In California, where more than 2.3 million acres have burned, the fires are spurred by climate change, drying plants and trees that then go up in flames. 10% of the entire population of Oregon has been evacuated. Meanwhile, the Atlantic's 16th and 17th named tropical storms are swirling, a record number for this time of year, and each one of these storms have an intensity that is unprecedented. Last month, it hit 130 degrees in Death Valley, the hottest the Earth has been in nearly a century. Siberia, famous for its icy climate, hit 100 degrees earlier this year, accompanied by wildfires. Before that, Australia and the Amazon were in flames. In 2019 was the second warmest year in record, and the end of the warmest decade ever recorded. Carbon dioxide levels and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere rose to new records in 2019. And yet, the United States has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015 that intended to address this very issue. And the average carbon footprint for a person in the United States is 16 tons, one of the highest rate in the world. Globally, the average is closer to 4 tons. Are we using our power appropriately? Now you might say, Rabbi, you're a theologian. What are you talking about? Geology and atmospheric science? Because science and religion go together. According to Jewish tradition, we use our reason and understanding to understand the world and then respond to it. The great sages were also scientists, and therefore to speak about the reality of our earth and what it is, and to follow the ideas and values and guidance of 95% of atmospheric scientists is the theologically correct thing to do. We have plenty of sins to repent for this year, but the abuse of our power is so obvious and urgent. In our national politics, there is need for serious, scientifically based national discussion of environmental issues, not based on politics, but based on facts. Unfortunately, this issue is not prominent enough in our presidential election. Whose fault is that? I don't blame the politicians. I blame we as citizens and voters not forcing it to be discussed. So let's start with 3 questions for anyone running for office. Is global climate change real? What do you think of the Paris Climate Agreement? And what policies do you propose to address the global rise in CO2? Not very complicated. But these are straight questions that need to be asked and answered again and again and again. It's not about politics. It's about addressing an issue that confronts the survival of humanity. God has given us such extraordinary planet. Let us ask ourselves in the eve of the new year 5781, will we abuse our power or use it to save life on our planet? It is the question and the potential sin that we cannot run away from this high holidays. And let me close with a beautiful vidui, a beautiful confession that I intend to make part of our regular high holiday service, but I want to share with you this evening. It is from the most recent high holiday prayer book of the Reform movement called Mishkan HaNefesh. Vidui for the 21st century. We confess our sins against the earth. We commit ourselves to saving it. We have assaulted our planet in countless ways. We have blamed others for the spiraling, deepening crisis. We have consumed thoughtlessly and irresponsibly. We have driven myriad species to the point of extinction. We have exhausted irreplaceable resources. We have failed to transcend borders and act unselfishly. We have given in to our many appetites and our gluttony. We have harmed beyond repair the habitats of living beings. We have ignored the signs of change in our climate and our seasons, and we have jeopardized the well-being of future generations. We have known the problem but left problem solving to others. We have lost sight of our role as God's partners in creation. We have mocked cynically those who love creatures great and small. We have neglected the environment, most of all in place of poverty. We have overpopulated our cities and overfished our oceans. We have polluted seashore and sky, fertile soil, and freshwater springs. We have questioned and doubted solid evidence of danger. We have ravaged the old-growth forest ecosystems created over centuries. We have spewed poison into the bloodstream of our land, its rivers, lakes, and estuaries. We have transformed dazzling beauty into industrial ugliness. We have used shared resources for personal gain and corporate profit. We have violated the commandment, do not destroy. We have wasted precious treasures, our God-given gifts. We have exploited the weakest and most vulnerable in our midst. And yet we yearn to be better guardians of this earth and the fullness thereof. Let us be zealous now to care for this unique corner of the cosmos, this planet, our sacred home. May this prayer of Vidui, this prayer of confession, not only be relevant for us today, let it move us and affect us during the high holidays, hopefully let it be part of the important reawakening that we need as a society as we confront this climate change challenge. And God willing, it will not be a climate change disaster. Shabbat Shalom.